Thank you. Senator Ensign. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's amazing how much there is agreement going around the table today, and I think that there's, yeah, be careful. And I think it's because there's a lot of frustration. There's a lot of frustration over the years with sanctions that are not enforced. And I think that no matter whether you're Republican or Democrat, when you see something that is wrong out there, it's very frustrating to a lot of us. So one of the questions that I'd like to get to is under the Iran, North Korea, Syria Non-Proliferation Act, the administration is supposed to submit every 6 months. We know the last time that a report was submitted to the Congress, either Ms. Pletska or Ms. Christopher.
2 years ago, I think they submitted a report.
I think it was 2008, and from what I understand, they have no plans to submit their next report. And this gets back to who it stated is responsible. Okay, we passed these laws saying you must do this, but then there's no penalty when they don't do it, and that's something that the Congress really. The only thing we have is basically the purse strings if they don't do something like that, and that's something that we should start considering when we actually do we really mean what we say when we want these reports every 6 months. This gets to my next question. We've been exploring how these entities have done business in Iraq or in Iran, or how they're still able to do business with the U.S. government to get contracts. In the course of the GAO study of this matter, did the GAO make an assessment of why the State Department has not sanctioned anyone under this act?
No. I mean, we based the information that's available. You have to go back to the 1998 decision and some of the reasons that the then State Department cited. Concerns about maintaining solidarity with the European Union. At that time, we were concerned about START negotiations with the Russians, the Asian financial crisis with the Malaysian firm. That is the only evidence out there as to what have been some of the intentions in the past as to why State has not enforced the Iran Sanctions Act.
Ms. Pletska, you've been around this, for a long time. You have any idea of why the State Department hasn't sanctioned anyone under this act? I mean, because they have loopholes that they can, you say drive a truck through, but maybe more of a freight train or something like that that's been able to be driven through these, or an oil tanker.
That, in fact, yes. The chairman asked a similar question, and I think that, frankly speaking, that's a question best directed to State. There's always an excuse. There's always something going on in diplomacy. Part of the difficulty of the structure of our government is that when the Department of State is responsible for the conduct of diplomacy and the conduct of the imposition of sanctions and decisions, they tend to weigh one against the other. And an interesting question was asked a moment ago, which is why are we so much more serious about the non-proliferation violations than we are about the energy sanctions? And a lot of that has to do, again, with the structure of the Department of State. The Undersecretary for International Security and Non-Proliferation in that bureau traditionally has been far more serious about violations of the Missile Technology Control Regime and our various Arms Export Control Act violations and nuclear proliferation than the Bureau of Near East Affairs has been serious about problems with Iran. It is a major challenge, and oversight is the answer.
This feeds right into my next question about the current bill that's in conference, the Iran Sanctions Act, to expand the authority of the President to impose sanctions upon entities providing refined petroleum products. There's a report or reports out there that to have put into the bill a cooperating country exemption. And so a couple of questions go along that line. If there was a cooperating country exemption put in the bill, could China be considered a cooperating country under current law, or under a law like that?
Well, it depends who you ask. If you ask me, the answer is no. But there is a cooperating country exemption in this bill, because if you cooperate, then you are not committing a sanctionable act, and you will not be sanctioned. It's really pretty straightforward. If you don't do it, then you're cooperating and you're not going to be sanctionable. So the notion that you have to provide a blanket exemption to countries that, in the judgment of somebody, who I think we still can't figure out who, is a really big mistake. And I think that this really goes to the bona fides of the administration in negotiating on this bill and their intention to enforce whatever ends up coming out of conference.
What if what if, say, the Russians decide to give certain missiles, the SA-20 or SA-21, would that be considered cooperating?
Well, I think the administration has suggested that they are getting good cooperation from the Russians and that they are getting good cooperation from the Chinese. And what they characterize as good cooperation is a willingness to sit down in New York at the United Nations and discuss the imposition of sanctions. And our standard, apparently, is that they are willing to come and discuss them, not that they're willing to agree to a stringent set of sanctions, but that they're merely willing to sit down with us, because apparently good behavior is constituted by just sitting down. And yes, the Russians have reiterated as recently as last month that they were going to be transferring an S-300 air defense system to the Iranians that would enable them to withstand a serious attack from outside.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I think that some of the answers to the questions illustrate the problems and that everybody's been asking here, and why I think there's so much frustration in the Congress with what's going on with diplomacy when it comes to Iran, because it's making our country look weak. It's making these sanctions completely ineffective. And if we really want to stop some of the proliferation issues and have some teeth behind it, we actually have to enforce the current laws. As Senator McCaskill said, what's the use of having new laws if our current laws aren't even being enforced? So we need to get much tougher, and I'm glad to hear in a bipartisan way that people are talking about getting tougher.
Thanks, Senator Ensign. Thanks for that.